Greetings and welcome back to the Sunday Sampler. This week we're going to be taking a quick look at Tomboys Need Love Too, a visual novel self-published by Zetsubou, and I hope I'm at least getting close to the pronunciation of that. And as per usual, this is, well, a review copy, even though I take this through Steam, so there will be a couple oddball things, but it's not that big a deal. And as usual for visual novels, I am recording this separately from the gameplay footage, and I promise this time the gameplay footage won't come into play as I do my little talky bits. So feel free to use the video as just, something to listen to while I chatter away, and for some pretty pictures to see what the game looks like and sound like. So, Tomboys Need Love Too. This is a budget visual novel released on Steam just a little bit ago, as well as itch.io, and I believe it's also available from the publisher's website, or the developer's website. It is self-published, but it's still the same, about the same thing. Well, let's just dive right into the story itself. Overall, the game is roughly 2 to 3 hours per playthrough, with 5 endings across 2 girls to romance, with one girl getting 3 and one girl getting 2 from everything I could tell based on the achievements on Steam. And I'll say that there's a lot of choices in this novel. You may think, well, duh, there's 5 endings, but the choices actually happen pretty soon into the story. I don't think you'll get to see them in the video itself, but it makes it so that the branching path branches off a lot sooner. Granted, there will still be some repeated dialogue, but it makes it so that the individual routes to the different endings are a little bit longer than in some of the visual novels I've covered in the past. That said, this is still a very adult story, even without the adult patch, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So, this is definitely not for children, and all the characters in this game are in their last year of high school, because of course they are. It's high school, visual novel, and anime people are in high school, or at least most of them, I guess I should say. And I'll also say about the choices in the game is that some of them aren't as straightforward as you may think, which sounds a little bit strange, but in some of the more budget visual novels I've played, it's very obvious what paths lead to what endings, or approximately what endings, because sometimes there's a little bit of a twist. But in this case, some of the choices make it so that it's not quite as obvious of, this was the good choice or bad choice based on what you're wanting to do with the story, because it is one of those things that you still have some degree of choice of where you're going and where you're trying to point the characters. But that said, it is also very obvious within the scene or the scene thereafter of whether or not that choice that you made was positive, even to the point that some of the audio cues from the music are very, I wouldn't say quite jarring, but makes it very apparent that, okay, maybe this wasn't the choice that you're wanting if you're wanting a certain ending. And I should say that I've only played through the game once so far, and I got the good ending, or good in as far as I could tell, at least. So some of my observations may be changed a little bit should I have played a different ending or a different storyline, or did a few different choices, because I went with more of, well, what the game kind of pushes you towards, at least in the very beginning with the title. I mean, Tomboys Need Love Too, right? So to characters, there are 3 major characters in this game, with a couple of side characters, but it's mostly centered around Kai, Chris, and Sophie. Kai is the male lead and the sort of a self-insert character. He is very wishy-washy and really pushed around by just about every force in the game, to be perfectly honest. So if you're wanting a more strong main character, then you may be a little bit disappointed with this. That said, it almost feels like this character is meant to be sort of a placeholder for the reader. So maybe that's where the author is going for. So it is one of those things that it is very much a trope that, some main characters just aren't very strong, and this is one of those. And on the flip side of things is Chris, or Christine, the female lead, or at least the female lead in my storyline. That said, she is one of the two female romances that you can have in this game. The other one being Sophie, of course. I mean, I've only named 3 characters, so yeah. So Chris is a very rambunctious tomboy. I mean, hence the name of the game, really. Also very headstrong and pushes the main character around quite a bit, at least in, like I said, my storyline. So if you're looking for a very strong female character, well, here you go. And, well, tomboys aren't something that you see a lot in visual novels. You see some, but usually they're sort of a side character or just a secondary character that's not given a lot of characterization. And that said, Chris has a lot of characterization, and she has a lot of scenes where her and Kai kind of banter back and forth, and they are childhood friends because, once again, fulfilling that trope. And you can feel just how old their friendship is, which is a very good thing, and a good piece of writing in that is that they're able to joke around and sit and talk about some very personal situations, which is something that I really liked. And on the kind of the, I guess, the flip side from Chris on the romance side of things is Sophie, which, at least in the storyline that I played, the good ending, or even a storyline focused more on Chris than Sophie. Sophie was a very shallow character, but that said, it feels like there's a lot more complexity or some more motivation behind her character. It's just in the, I hate using the term main storyline because I think you are being pushed to side with Chris, at least in the beginning. Then maybe go back and see what is going on with Sophie. She does feel very shallow, and she doesn't really get a lot of motivation across. She has only a couple of scenes, and that it's something that could have used probably a little bit more work. But then again, it may just be all focused on her storylines, and whenever you go with her instead of Chris. So that's your 3 main characters. And let's go with sound design, then we'll dive into graphics and the adult patch. Sound, well, no voice acting to be heard whatsoever, which isn't a detriment, but also isn't a positive. I mean, it's one of those stylistic choices, and this is, like I said, a budget title, so you may be expecting at least some voice acting, because some budget titles go for some voice acting, some doesn't. This is a non-voiced game, so that's one thing out of the way right away. And really the only thing in this game, audio-wise, is the music, which does a decent job of setting the mood, and with alright loops. There's a couple that are a bit jarring, but overall they're alright. It's not music that I think I would sit down and listen to personally, or go out of the way to really listen to, but it was pleasant enough. It didn't pull me out of the game, or it didn't annoy me. That said, and this is also in the sound bit, is that I think my favorite part of how the music was used was when it wasn't used, which sounds like a bit of a slight, doesn't it? But what I'm saying is that the author knew when to have silence. Or there was a particular scene, I would say a little less than halfway through, where Kai, the main male character, I mean, he's the one that you're following throughout all this, suddenly has this realization, and this happy, cheerful music just stops in the middle. It's loop in the middle of the scene, and it's one of those things that kind of the shoe drops. I guess the best movie analogy would be somebody pulling the plug on the jukebox. And that's what this felt like, and it was a really good use of the music to know when not to use the music, and know when to stop the music. So let's move on to the graphical side of things. Simple but clean graphics overall, with at least the sprites have a fair amount of different, I guess, frames would be the best way to put it, just different expressions. That said, there is just 3 characters, so overall graphics are used very often, and especially backgrounds. There's not a lot of variety in the scenery, and the game also takes place in a short span of time, story-wise. So there may not just have been time to really do a lot of graphical stuff. Anyway, so that's one of those little oddities that a short story, not a lot of need of graphics anyway. But I did like the sprites. They are, while simple, colorful enough, and animated enough for lack of a better term, that it does a pretty good job. CGI scenes, on the other hand, was a little bit lacking for me. They are still done really well with a lot of details, but I should say detailed enough. It's still fairly simple graphics, still very clean graphics. But what got me was that they're static. I know that sounds a little strange, but what I'm saying is that if a scene that has the CGI in it, something happens, then it's not really reflected on screen. So if two characters hug, for example, it could still show a different scene altogether. And it's just one of those things that it's just a static screen, so it's really conveys the more budget nature of the game. I realize that it's likely because of the patch and making it so that each scene had to be not completely redrawn, because I'll get into that just a little bit, but have essentially two sets of scenes that that's probably where the animation went. But at the same time, the only scene that I really recall having more than one frame, for lack of a better term, was the last scene in the game that I had, at least with the happy ending. So there you go. And just because the graphics are repeated, it's one of those things that it feels a little stale by the time that the story is over. But then again, it is also a 2 to 3 hour story, so it just it kind of reeks of the budget nature of the game, which is a little unfortunate. But it's one of those things that I don't think this would really be attractive as a $15 visual novel, and since it's a $10, that $5 difference puts in a kind of a different, almost impulse buy tier. So since I mentioned the adult patch a couple times, let's dive into that. First of all, it can be easily toggled on and off, and it is a free patch available that it's compatible with both the Steam version and the itch.io version, and very easy to toggle on and off in the options menu. And as far as I could tell, there's little to no content without the adult patch. Granted, I did just go through the scenes again with it turned off in the options menu and not a fresh install, but it didn't seem like it was lacking any of the story elements. So it's not like some other visual novels where it's just fade to black and you get basically a synopsis of what happened. Most of what the patch is on the visual side of things. Shirts opening a little bit more, or a little bit of titillation here or there, but the scenes still play out mostly intact from what I can tell. It looked like a couple may have been truncated a little bit, but not much. Or if they're even truncated, it's just a line or two. And the adult patch, I think it's more of a take it or leave it thing. It's more just, do you want to see tits? Because that's, tits and other naughty bits. But it's not one of those things that it feels like you're lacking in story because you didn't want to see that. But then again, it is also a very sexual story, so which is a little bit strange since it's available on Steam, because usually Steam, especially budget Steam visual novels, they'll go for a very torn down version for the base game and then add to it with the patch. It's more just basically frosting. So overall, I think it's a pretty decent budget visual novel. I would have liked to have seen the characters balanced out a little bit more. Granted, since the story ending that I got was was the 5th ending out of 5, it feels it's a little bit paradoxical because I got the 5th ending out of 5. It feels like, okay, that should be the last one I got, but it's also, I followed essentially what the game wants me to do based on the title, and kind of the play off of the two main characters, or I guess I should say 2 out of 3 main characters. So it feels a little odd. Then again, it's not one of the masterpiece visual novels. And also, if you want to start a female lead, you'll definitely find that here. But you also may be turned off a little bit with just how wishy-washy the main lead is, how wimpy he is, because he never really asserts himself. He never really talks back outside of just joking back and forth with Chris, at least, like I said, in my story. Since I've only played it once, he may change based on going with Sophie instead. That's very, very possible. I just don't know that, because this is just a first impressions and not a full review. To do a full review, I think I would have done at least 4 or even all 5 of the endings just to see what's going on. Overall, I really enjoyed it. It's one of those visual novels that I don't think it's going to be one that I recommend overall, a blanket recommendation for everyone. But if you're interested in a more assertive female character, or just really want to try something different, because this is a bit different, even though it does have the same overall settings, female, 2 females kind of bickering over, honestly, kind of a generic male lead, but the male lead is more of a self-insert character. It's one of those strange things that kind of keeps me from doing a blanket recommendation, but it's one of those that, yes, it's cheap enough that if someone's interested in it, it's good enough. And I think that wraps us up with the Sunday Sampler this week. As always, constructive feedback is greatly appreciated in the comments below. Or if you don't really have anything to say but want to let me know that you've enjoyed or hated this, hit the appropriate buttons and subscribe if you want to see more of the Sunday Sampler, my Let's Play content, or anything else that may appear on this channel. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll be back with more of the Sunday Sampler next week. I'll see you then.